My friends, it might be a little early to tell, but I think Pariah Nexus might be my favorite Warhammer Plus TV show yet. The second episode for Pariah Nexus dropped this week, and after a first episode that was full of mystery and ended on a cliffhanger, I was super excited to see where the next episode was going to take us. Where are the salamanders that crash landed? What is this Sister of Battle going to do with a death mark on her tail? Well, this second episode definitely answered a lot of those questions, so let's break it down.
There is no peace amongst the stars, for in the grim, dark future, there is only war.
So we left off in Pariah Nexus Episode 1 with the Sister of Battle, Danica, finding a salamander. She had been searching the entire time for their downed gunship. In this episode, we start off a few hours before they meet up. We enter with the salamander gunship in flames, and it seems like the same mind-controlled army of guardsmen are heading towards the crash site. Inside the wreck itself, there is one surviving salamander. The rest have all died in the crash in various ways. Any hope that another salamander might be alive is dashed when we see the inside of his helmet lenses. Fatality markers are everywhere, and 4 out of the 5 squad identifiers are red. As the salamander begins his funeral rites on his brothers, a lone Kriegsman appears. The salamander tries to communicate with him, but he is mumbling incoherently and then attacks him. More of the same muttering Kriegsmen enter the wreck, and not knowing whether this is some type of treachery or some type of madness, the salamander takes them out. We cut to a couple of Necrons who are mopping up after a battle. They are quickly ambushed and slain by this salamander, and we get to see the full extent of the conflict within this holy city. As our salamander is walking through the devastation, we see him piece together how this battle played out. Ultramarines are hit with atom-dissolving beams of green energy. Guardsmen fight to the last man against a tide of malicious necrodermis. And above it all, Sisters of Battle scream ecclesiarchal litanies as they are mowed down by the overwhelming Necron forces. It is very clear from this recreation that the human forces on this planet have lost. But even in all of this devastation, there are still survivors. The salamander, using his heat vision, finds a group of civilians still alive. An ecclesiarchal priest, a father and his son, and a mother and her daughter. Seeing how frightened these mortals are, our salamander takes off his helmet in an effort to ease their fears. He introduces himself as Sakan, a brother of the 3rd company of the Salamanders chapter. Despite whispered warnings from their parents, the children are intrigued to see one of the Emperor's angels in person, especially one who looks so different like the salamanders do. They ask questions about his physiology and whether he feels pain. But the reality of this planet at war comes back with distant sounds of combat. And as you would expect from a salamander, he takes these people with him in order to protect them. And at this point, we are caught up on the timeline between the first and second episodes. Sakan is aiming his bolter at the sister they've come across, and she's aiming right back. After a tense moment, they both lower their weapons and introduce themselves. It's revealed that the salamanders are on this planet in order to find the Ultramarines and form a joint defense. But it seems Sakan and his squad were not the only ones to suffer extreme casualties. Before they can continue debriefing each other, the sister sees the civilians that are with the salamander. She immediately raises a bolter to aim at them, and Sakan steps in the way. There's an incredibly tense moment where it seems that the sister is going to attack both the salamander and those he's protecting. Having watched nearly the entire planet succumb to the Xenos influence, she is extremely wary of anyone who survived. But before the sister and the salamander come to blows, they are attacked by the death mark. Seeing the fear of these civilians as they're attacked, along with her conscience yelling at her, the sister resolves to fight alongside the salamander, and they engage the death mark. This is where the second episode ends. Let's go ahead and unpack that episode. Call me biased if you want as an unapologetic salamander lover, but I thought that this episode was way more interesting than the first. There was a lot more dialogue from a lot of different people, and that just fills in the world. And I personally really enjoyed the fact that they went back and followed the salamander through the hours that we missed during the first episode. This episode also showed the extent of the Necron's destruction. There are not many survivors outside of the people that Sakan is protecting, himself and the Sister of Battle. And the only other survivors that they showed during the episode were taken out by the Necrons. Two of my favorite things in this episode, however, were the smaller world-building details. I read a lot of Warhammer books, and so I kind of have to picture a lot of the stuff that they talk about in my head. When they talk about retinal displays or lens displays, I never know exactly how the UI is supposed to look. And Sakan makes heavy use of the technology that is available to him. I also really enjoyed the kind of recreation of the battle that he went through. Space Marines have so many senses that are beyond anything human. It was very cool to see him use those senses to piece together the battle. That type of scrutiny can only be achieved through genetic apotheosis and extreme battle training. Honestly, there wasn't anything I didn't like about this episode. The only change I would have made was maybe putting the two episodes into one and having an extended first episode. But other than that, I'm very much enjoying this series, and I'm glad that they are having a regular release schedule. One of my main gripes about Hammer and Bolter, which is another Warhammer Plus TV show, is that they just release episodes whenever they finish with them. And luckily that doesn't seem to be the case here. Now it's time for some speculations. So last time we speculated that the Acadian trooper that was with Sister Danica was not really there. She seems to be an embodiment of the sister's conscience and takes the form of this Acadian trooper, possibly her mother. In this episode, possibly confirms that that is true. When Sister Danica and Sakan finally meet, he does not acknowledge the Acadian trooper at all. In fact, in some of their scenes together, the Acadian trooper is absent. When Sister Danica is trying to kill the citizens that are with Sakan, the Acadian trooper is warning her against it. She even speaks at the same time as Sakan, interrupting one of the Emperor's very own angels. And he doesn't even bat an eye at it. There's also the moment when Danica resolves to help protect these people. The Acadian trooper is there trying to spur her into action, and none of the civilians acknowledge her presence. So it seems that that is confirmed. I do, however, have a new speculation that might be a little out there. I think that whatever mind control is happening to the people of this planet possibly is affecting the sister as well. When she's explaining to Sakan what has happened to this planet, she says the Necrons started kidnapping people, and at the same moment, she grabs her head. Now before, I thought the blood running down her face might have been from a past injury during the fighting. But as soon as she mentions that the Necron are kidnapping people, her head begins to pain her. Now I would hate to see one of the incorruptible sisters of our martyred lady become a pawn of the Necrons, but it would make for an interesting story. This episode had very little Necron involvement in it, so I'm hoping that the next one will answer some of these questions. That's going to do it for this review of the second episode of Pariah Nexus. Every other Wednesday when these episodes come out, I'll be watching them in the Discord with my community, so join if you'd like to watch. Thank you all for tuning in. Leave a like, a comment, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all in the next one.